I've got better things to do. Like film this crash course video for Unit 6 of AP Government and Politics. Unit 6 is all about public policy, and this video will consist of the top 10 acts of Congress.
Up first, we have the Hatch Act. It prohibits employees in the executive branch, except the president, vice president, and other high officials, from engaging in some forms of political activity. It was passed because federal staff members were actively supporting congressional candidates in the 1938 elections, which influenced voters and therefore the outcome of the election. The act was signed by FDR in 1939.
That's loud.
We have the Civil Rights Act, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This was put in place to end segregation in an attempt to make people equal. It was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964. Segregation.
Now we have the Voting Rights Act. It overcame legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote. Even though it was legal for African Americans to vote, states had the power to prevent them from voting, which is why this act was passed. It was signed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965.
Next is the Clean Air Act, which was designed to control air pollution at the national level. It was passed to help protect our environment and keep our air as clean as possible. It was signed by Richard Nixon in 1970.
And now to the weather.
Now we have the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act, which allowed Congress to meet its own budget goals and be less reliant on the president's budget. This was passed so that the president did not have too much power over money and spending. It was passed by Congress by overriding President Richard Nixon's veto in 1974.
Wait. Right.
Lebanon, that's a country.
Up now is the Federal Election Campaign Act. This act limits presidential campaign spending, attempted to limit contributions, I don't even know what I was trying to say. Up now is the Federal Election Campaign Act. This act limits presidential campaign spending, attempted to limit contributions, required disclosure of campaign finance information, provided public financing for presidential campaigns, and established the FEC. It was passed so that one president did not dominate the whole election solely based on money. This act was signed by Richard Nixon in 1974. In other words, don't make it rain over 5K.
Up next is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It prohibits discrimination based on disability. It was passed so that people with disabilities were treated equally. It was signed by President George H.W. Bush in 1990.
I need some braille. There's no braille here.
We have the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. It is a comprehensive bipartisan welfare reform plan that changes the welfare system that requires work for time-limited assistance. This act was passed that those in a lower class can still get help, but they have to actually work for the help instead of getting paid to sit around. It was signed by President Bill Clinton in 1996.
We have the Patriot Act. This act reduces restrictions on government gathering intelligence, regulating financial transactions, and detaining and deporting terrorism suspects. This act was passed soon after 9/11 to help protect Americans and hopefully prevent something tragic as 9/11 from happening again. It was signed by President George W. Bush in 2001. Next is the No Child Left Behind Act, which requires all states to administer proficiency tests in public schools in order to monitor student progress. This was passed to make sure that all children in public schools were prepared to move on to the next grade. It was signed by President George W. Bush in 2001. Now we have the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act, which allowed Congress to meet its own...
Excuse me.
Ms. Mixon?
You know it does that. Okay, come on. Reese,
JMAD's here to say this in simpler terms. The Budget and Control Act
No.
of Impoundment. The Congressional Budget
and Impoundment Control Act.
Guys.
I got it.
That beat is not good.
Go.
Next, I can't.
I mean, my boss. Are you calling me a stud? Riley?
Something like that.
Something funny?
He said, I don't know.
I like your name, Reese.
Oh, thanks. Stop it.
Go, Reese.
I hope he got that on video.
Next is the No Child Left Behind Act.
Hey, hey. Oh, I thought you were a kid.